Getting it all set up. Whoa, look at that, as if we actually knew what we were doing. And I just need to adjust this by about 0.5 millimeter. And then you can actually see me, and I have to sit up. There we go. Okay, I'm trying to get my lighting right. I'm not sure I'm getting it. I have to do more, but good to see members of the squadron here. I trust all of you can see and hear me. The best way to let me know that's the case is say hello in the chat. And that's also the place where you can ask all kinds of questions. We have a whole bunch from people who signed up ahead of time, so I'll be trying to get to those. On the topic of Ferrari customers, how do we apply a filter that involves a Ferrari to learn which customers actually want to buy what we have to have, what we happen to have for sale, and what we need to build for them in the future. So that's today's topic, is what's the Ferrari filter? And I'm going to explain a whole bunch more about that very soon. So let me fill you in on a few technical details. So the first is that this is being recorded, so you can come back and watch it later. If you need to be somewhere else, that's completely fine. And we have a very nice forum, and you'll find links to the posts below, in which thousands of people are commenting and reading and bringing up different topics that are relevant to them. This one actually came from a discussion on the forum originally, and then I adapted it, as I'm going to explain. So lots of opportunities to ask questions about technology, questions about sales, questions about product design, all of those sorts of things. We've got experts on all those areas in the forum. And that's why we have the Squirrel Squadron. It's my way of getting tech and non-tech people together. We had a live event last week in which we had a bunch of folks, some of whom were apologizing. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm not a technical person. I'm a CFO. I wanted to hug them. I was very glad that we have technical and non-technical people working together. That's what the Squadron is all about. We also, of course, have events like this very regularly. Our next one is for executives. It's another of my booklets. So I've been cranking these out. I don't know if Laura's running out of space, but we got a booklet on pretty much any topic you can choose, and I'm very happy to share these booklets with you if you'd like. The forum, the Squadron, is all about this kind of sharing, bringing up issues and topics, sharing some ideas and experience that we all have, and the more I can do that for you, the better. So let's try to do lots of that in both forums, events like this, on the forum where people are discussing, and any place else we can get the Squadron together. So that's what the Squadron's all about. That's my brief little description for you. The next, as I say, the next live event like this, online live event, is on accountability. And I was just getting 3 or 4 questions about this yesterday from clients who were saying, how do we know that our tech team is doing what we told them to do? And how do we know that what they are doing that we told them to do actually works and that people want to buy more stuff? So those are questions that I'm going to answer in another of these booklets, some ideas and tips and tricks that I've been using for those for years, and we'll be launching in a few things by the things call back. Lots of people taught me. I would like to help others learn. That's what I'm here for. Good stuff. So some of you are lurking around here. You really want to ask me about Ferraris. That's fantastic. Would you mind just saying hi in the chat? I can see who's saying hi and who's not, and say hi back to you, particularly if you have questions. What brought you here? What made you interested in this topic enough to show up and watch me here on the screen chatting to you about Ferraris and valuable customers and building valuable things? Must have driven you somehow. Something brought you here. Let me know what that is in the chat, and then I will be able to respond to it. I also really like it when people interrupt me and disagree with me and make comments in the chat all the way through. So that's your invitation to argue with me. Some of my favorite arguments have happened here on live streams just like this one. And my goal is to provoke you, give you some new thoughts and ideas. I'd love it if you did the same for me. Okay, so let me launch into some of my stories, some of my ideas about filtering for customers, but I'm not going to start with Ferraris. I promise, explain a whole lot about why Ferraris are useful, Ferrari cars, I mean, are useful for determining which customers you want to serve and which you don't. But let me start someplace else, and that is with somebody called Mr. Beast. And some of you will know who Mr. Beast is. If you have children of a certain age, you definitely know who Mr. Beast is. For those who have not yet been enlightened and have not joined, I don't know what he calls it. Does he have a squadron? Is it the Beast Squadron, the Beast Boys? It couldn't be boys. It's men and women. and he has a huge following on YouTube. And what he's just done is released his second series of something called Beast Games, which is very close to Squid Game. If you've seen that, I think it's South Korean TV series. What Beast Games is all about is people winning insane amounts of money by screwing each other over and making each other's lives very difficult, betraying each other, winning at games in ways that are fair or unfair. So it's one of these reality programs, but with quite a lot of cash, we could say. Huge boxes full of $1 bills, illustrating how much money you could win. He was just giving away $1 million at the Super Bowl, and I don't think anybody's won it yet. So that's the kind of guy this is. And the reason I bring him up is not because I think he's your customer. If any of you have Mr. Beast as a customer, I'd really like to talk to you. What kind of software does he use? You know, he has a 400-person production company, and he builds the biggest sets in the world and all kinds of stuff. He has the world's biggest TV in the latest one. So I'd be very interested if any of you have this connection. But that's not what I'm talking about. The thing that I think is most interesting about various Mr. Beast properties is that he manages, with a huge amount of cash, to warp what people do and what they think and change their thinking to align with somebody else's. So, for example, you might have somebody who is sitting, literally physically sitting, on $1 million. And Mr. Beast says, hey, would you like to take that $1 million home? And the person says, yeah, I sure would. And the person says, yeah, you can do that, but a whole bunch of other people get disqualified. So you can't, you can win, but they can't. And you can't win the huge prize of $5 million. Now, that really changes people's thinking. You could argue that it's for good or for ill, right? Should we be changing people's thinking in that way? But when you're sitting on top of $1 million and somebody says, well, you can screw these people over and you'll get $1 million, sometimes they think a little bit differently about that. And that's the kind of change in thinking that I want to illustrate for you. That's what you almost need to do. You need to do that level of not necessarily manipulation. I'm not arguing in favor of Mr. Beast's method, but certainly the temptation of a huge reward is what you need to get people motivated quite a lot of the time. Because think about a typical business that you might sell to, or a typical consumer who's happily walking along the street or going to a football game or whatever it is they do. Those folks are in a rut. They're in a standard pattern. And you got to bounce them out of that pattern somehow. That's why TV ads start quite loud, right? They're trying to wake you up if you've fallen asleep in front of the telly. That's why, you'll have pattern interrupts in online ads. They'll look really different. One weird trick to do this thing, except it'll be one weird idea. It'll change a little bit. And they're trying to get your attention. They're trying to break you out of a pattern and get you operating in a different pattern. That's what you need to do if you want your software to be attractive to people who might buy it. They need to be thinking differently about it, because if they stick with what they have, there's no reason that they'll switch to whatever it is you're using. By the way, this goes just as much for retail as for business, B2B. It goes just as much for established brands as for new brands. I've worked with all of the above, and consistently, what you need is to bounce people out of their pattern and give them a huge motivation to reach into their wallet if they're a consumer, or to go over to procurement and say, hey, procurement people, I got to fill in a whole bunch of paperwork so I can buy stuff from this guy over here. And they say, don't you like the old guy? We've been working with them for a long time. They got to have a really good answer for why they're going to go and write you a big check for a piece of software that you might have, or begin transferring their department to use your software, or begin operating with the service that you'd like to provide them. Any of those require a huge motivation. There's a huge sort of activation energy. You can imagine a sort of ball in a rut, in a groove. And to get it out of the groove, you have to push pretty hard to get it up and over the edge. Then once it's out, you can move it around much more easily. Now, I make this point, maybe I'm belaboring the point, but I make it because it's so difficult. The activation energy is so high that you need some very powerful tools to release it. And guess what? One of those powerful tools is a Ferrari. Now, why am I talking about a Ferrari to you? Maybe many of you are not in industries in which people commonly have Ferraris, but I have been in such an industry, and I cut my teeth in the city of London. Those of you who are in the United States would know the equivalent as Wall Street in New York. There are equivalents in San Francisco and in Dubai and in lots of other places. the financial centers that really drive big parts of the economy. And if you've noticed, if you've watched movies like, I've forgotten the name, The Big Short, Wolf of Wall Street, all of those, they're really true. Those folks are party animals, but also they move around huge amounts of money and they get gigantic bonuses. And with those bonuses, they sometimes buy Ferraris. This is my point about the Ferrari filter. If what you are selling can help one of those people to buy a Ferrari that they would not otherwise have bought, you have a very strong motivation, which is very similar to the Mr. Beast motivation, right? You get some folks, you say, if you do this and that and the other, you play this game, you win this competition, you will get that huge stack of money over there. That's very similar to somebody saying, if I can win Asia, if I can beat Bloomberg, if I can get a corner on this market, then I will make a huge amount of money. I will get a big bonus and I can buy a Ferrari. Now, I brought a visual aid here. I brought my Ferrari. Don't worry, I'm not going to take you up front and show you my Ferrari because I don't have one, nor would I want one. But I do have my Lego Ferrari here. And I brought this along, first of all, because I like Lego, but second, because I used this as a visual aid with a client very recently. And the point I was making to that client when I brought them actually a full-size Ferrari Lego to put together at the strategy session we were doing together, the point I was making to them was, we got to look for those people who are motivated strongly by our software. If they aren't motivated strongly, we aren't going to get that activation energy, get them over the hump, get them moving to actually buy the software that we have to sell. And that was their biggest problem. They had a lot of different things they were trying and a lot of different customers they were trying to talk to. None of them were going to get a Ferrari as a result of what they were buying. And so I pushed them very hard. We kind of came up with all kinds of ideas, and that's now digging in. It's really getting some results for them now. And it's not because they built Lego Ferraris, which we did, but it's because they identified which customers were going to be very, very strongly motivated to purchase software from them and thereby get a Ferrari. And that's the filter that I'm encouraging you to apply. Look at the customers that you might work with. Figure out which ones are going to use your software to get an unfair, huge advantage, that they're going to get a stack of money, and then invite them to connect your software to that stack of money. And then the sale becomes relatively easy. Now, some of this is sales 101, and some of you are excellent salespeople, and you already know how sales works. And you say, well, Squirrel, why are you teaching me this? Well, your engineers really don't understand this, is my consistent experience, that engineers think about what the best is. What's the fastest car? What's the most fuel-efficient car? What's the one that has the brightest red stripes, whatever it might be? But there's some kind of objective reality, something that makes the item that you're selling the best. Now, I'll ask you guys to think about Betamax, which is a famous example, and there are plenty of similar examples probably in industries you know better than me, of products that are better. If you do most measurements of Betamax, the format for videotaping, that was competing with the kind we currently use. I forget the name. Sorry, Betamax sticks in my head, but I forget the other. But Betamax lost. Even though it was better on most measures, it was higher resolution, it was better quality, it lasted longer, it had many different positive characteristics, and we don't use it. And the reason we don't use it is because something else won out in the market. For some reason, we could go into the history of videotapes, and I don't propose to do that here. But the point is that just because it looks better and seems better does not mean that that's going to motivate your customer. And you have to be very much in touch with your actual customer. Engineers are bad at this. I'm constantly retraining engineers and retraining those who work with them to present this kind of information the way I am to you. And I encourage you to use my Ferrari analogy or anything else that helps you. Encourage, guarantee that engineers who are building the software that you're going to sell, now they're probably prompting AIs to do it, but however they're producing new software, adding new features, building things that make your customers happier and make them pay you more, they better be doing that in close concert with the customers. So let me tell you another story from the front lines of the finance industry. There's going to be a lot of finance in this one, simply because those are the guys who really have the most clear Ferrari needs. I'll give you some examples of other needs you might fill that don't involve cars and petrol and driving fast. but I'm going to stick with these for the moment because I think they're quite powerful and very familiar. We've all driven cars or seen cars or understand why cars might be motivational and why someone might want a Ferrari. Kind of makes sense to all of us, I think. So it's a good example to start with. But let me tell you about this experience I had. I had somebody in my team who really did not understand what motivated customers and why that they might want a particular type of software, a type that was really in your face, visible, easy to use, stood out from the rest. And I had one guy who was just a really strong skeptic on this. His name was Ryan. And Ryan said, we don't need a designer. We don't need all this fancy stuff. We just need to give people a way to make more money. And I said, Ryan, I'd like you to go on a trading floor. And a trading floor is a place you've probably seen, if you've not been on one, seen in Wolf of Wall Street, Big Short, those kinds of financial drama movies. And it's just as loud and noisy as it sounds in those movies. There's a squawk box going, probably 3 or 4, spitting out news everywhere. There's televisions tuned to many different channels. There's traders throwing things back and forth at each other, sometimes phones, sometimes sandwiches, sometimes orders even. So it's quite a chaotic environment. And I sent Ryan into this. He's an engineer, right? Engineers don't operate well in noisy environments. They don't write good code. But I didn't care. I wanted him to see what that environment was like and then come back. And he came back and he said something I will never forget. He said, Squirrel, now I really understand these customers. I understand why they do so much cocaine. And I will not comment on the cocaine use of our customers at that time, but he wasn't far wrong. And he got a visceral understanding of what those engineers needed needed to understand in order to build software someone would want to buy. They would not have got that. Ryan would not have had that deep visceral understanding had he not been on a trading floor. Engineers that I've sent along on sales calls would not have had that deep understanding had they not been on a sales call listening to somebody who said, that's too expensive. That's not for this market. They use it in the US, but not over here. When you hear those objections and you understand what you are building in the software that overcomes them, you're much more closely tied to what you're building and who gets a Ferrari, right? That's the crucial question. If you know that this person is getting a Ferrari as a result of this feature that you're building, you get real interested in what that person's doing, right? So this is a strong motivation for your engineers. It's a way to get your engineers really involved. And sometimes kicking and screaming, right? Ryan did not want to go to the trading floor. He wanted to write more back-end code. He wanted to write more APIs and database code and other stuff. He didn't want to mess with this design stuff. He came back converted, right? He had Paul on the road to Damascus, right? He was hit by lightning. He's like, oh man, I got it now. And he was a big advocate after that. But he needed that experience, meeting the people who were going to get a Ferrari and understanding what motivated them. Okay, so that's a way to use this kind of notion with your engineers. I'll just pause for 1 second. If you have questions, if I'm going too fast, if I'm covering stuff that's not interesting, you want me to do something else, please let me know. The chat's right there. Some of you are commenting on some things, but I don't have anything to respond to yet. I do have some questions from people who are watching this on the recording. Hello, recording, by the way, if you're watching this later. And I will come to those for sure, as well as questions you guys put in the chat. But please ask me questions, argue with me, tell me that you don't think this is a motivation or it doesn't apply in your situation. I'll see if I can help you, and maybe I'll agree with you, and we'll figure out a different way to approach it. Okay, so I've mentioned sort of this Ferrari prioritization mechanism. How do you use it? But there's ways that it breaks down, and there's ways that you want to look for other things. And there are traps and pitfalls in trying to use this method. I'll tell you about one, again, a finance industry story. In this case, I thought I had identified a slam dunk. It was definitely going to get somebody a Ferrari, or at least it would get them not to be fired, which is also a very strong motive, right? So you can have the promise of a wonderful new toy, right? You're going to get something good. You can also have a huge stick, right? Not only a carrot. It's going to get you fired. It's going to get you in trouble with the regulator. Those are very strong motivations. And I know a lot of companies, for example, that have followed along behind regulators and said, oh, the regulator's telling you to do this. You won't be in compliance. You'll be put out of business if you don't do this. Guess what? We can solve it for you. That's quite a strong business model used carefully, right? You don't want to actually threaten your customers. You want to be helpful to them. But I'd found something like this. I said, man, either somebody's going to get fired for this if we don't fix it, or we're going to be heroes and somebody's going to be really, really strongly rewarded for it. And we found it by looking in the log files. Now, somebody might not know what a log file is. Your computer's going along doing stuff, and it writes down what it does along the way. And it says, at this time, I did this thing. At this time, the user did this. At this time, I responded with this response, and so on. So you can look, it's very boring, but you can look in there and see all the things the computer did. And sometimes you discover something you didn't expect. And that's what I found. I found that there were reports that a hedge fund was using. These are guys with more money than God, huge positions and portfolio's of billions and billions of dollars with a B, managed on spreadsheets and stuff. So we were giving them new tools that would make that smoother for them so they could manage their billions and make even more. And I found reports that they got that took 10 minutes to run. So you can imagine some trader who's sitting there, making $1 million a minute, and he's or she is twiddling her thumbs, right? Just like, oh man, I gotta wait. Okay, let's get another cup of coffee. Oh, we're gonna wait for this report. That was what I was envisioning. I thought that's what my Ferrari customer was doing, and I thought, man, these folks are worth an awful lot. If I'm wasting their time for 10 minutes at a go, not good. I got to do something about that. So I trotted off. Thank heavens I did this. I didn't just go fix it and spend weeks and weeks of my team's time building something new. I trotted off to the head of the hedge fund, the person who ran the whole thing and was very, very, very wealthy. I think he had several Ferraris, right? So he was doing very well already. And I thought I was going to tell him how to get even more. So I said, oh, look what I found. It's taking 10 minutes to run these things. Imagine how much that's costing you. We've got to get that faster for you, so it's much, much better for your operation, much more profitable. And he said, Squirrel, do you know where this software is run? Who's using this? I said, well, I think it's your traders, isn't it? He said, no. We have some people in India. They're far away from us here in London, and they're wonderful folks. We employ them. We love them. We think they're great. They work overnight for our time zone, right? So they wake up way before us when the sun comes up for them. We're still sleeping, and they run these reports. I, Mr. Fancy Hedge Fund Manager, I don't care how long it takes them. I'll buy them more coffee, right? I'm perfectly happy. They can read a comic book. It's perfectly okay with me as long as I get my report first thing in the morning. And I do. That's completely fine. They run all the right ones. They put them in the right folders for me. I can look at them in the morning. I get the information I need to trade, and so do all my traders. This doesn't matter to anybody who gets a Ferrari. So Squirrel, don't work on these reports. And that was really helpful feedback. I was really glad I hadn't wasted time. Then he told me what he actually needed from the reports. He said, what I need is slicker reports. I need ones that look better, that are more exciting, that have punchy graphics and greater information and huge profit numbers all over them, so that I can take them to people who invest in my hedge fund and get them to give me even more so I can make more for them and me. And that made a heck of a lot of sense. That was going to get him a Ferrari. And probably earned him several as a result of doing that. And guess what we did? Instead of making the reports faster, we made them much nicer. And that was much more help to him. So the danger is you might identify a person who's going to get a Ferrari as a result of the software that you're building. I had the right person. I went to the right guy. But I misinterpreted what he was doing. And this then reinforces the notion that you got to be on the trading floors. You got to be riding along on the sales calls. You got to be answering the customer service phone messages and emails and so on. You got to be involved in that, and you need to do that at the engineering level, because it was an engineering activity I was doing. I was pointing through log files, right? The product managers are not doing that. Account managers are not doing that. Customer service people are not doing that. It's us geeks, right? Us folks with Star Wars t-shirts. We're looking through log files. We notice stuff like this that seem like great opportunities. And if you're wondering why your engineers sometimes say, oh, this is the best practice, we need to do this thing, this is the right thing, and you can't argue with them, it's because they can't put it in terms of your Ferrari customer, because they've probably never met one. And that's your fault. You should help them or force them, if you need to go talk to those people the way I made Ryan do it. You know what? I probably would have fired Ryan if he'd refused. Right? Not to be mean to him or anything. He might be watching. I don't know. He turned out to be a wonderful engineer and really helped us once he kind of got aligned. But what I couldn't do was allow him to go off and build his back-end code that nobody understood, that wasn't going to earn anyone a Ferrari. I needed him to be aligned to what the customer needed, so I sent him there. And guess what? I had another story about me getting that wrong. So it's easy to get it wrong. You need the frequent corrections of interaction with the Ferrari customers. Okay. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to turn to some questions now from chat and other places. We did get a bunch from folks who couldn't come or weren't sure whether they could come, and they sent questions ahead of time. So let me just find the right screen for both things, which is not here, right over there. There we go. I found it. Excellent. So Luca asks, in an ever-changing situation with customers being deceived into thinking that a web application can be built paying £14.99 a month, how do we select the Ferraris from the 500s? Now, I am not a race car driver. I assume a 500 is a less fancy race car or less fancy consumer car. I don't actually know. But I think what Luca's asking is, please tell me, Luca, if I've misunderstood your question. Lots of people think software is cheap. And it is an increasing misapprehension. People are getting much more of this idea because they go off to Replit or Base 44 or Lovable, and they crank it out themselves. And they say, look, I built the software. I don't have to pay you millions of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, even thousands of pounds. I can build it myself. I don't need any of you expensive developers speaking Klingon. You know, that's not for me. I'm going to go build it. And I say to those folks, good luck. Because the problem is that you can build wonderful prototypes with AI, even before AI, you know, with a bunch of junior developers. You throw them at a problem, you pay them very poorly, you get them perhaps from some distant land, and they're off in Remotistan building whatever it is you told them to build. You're going to get a very poor result. It's not going to scale. It's not going to be well designed. It's not going to be reliable. It's going to go down a lot. So, Luca, what I would point to is the value to your Ferrari customer. Identify who it is who would get the Ferrari. And what I'm not distinguishing here, maybe this wasn't clear when you asked your question, I'm saying you need to get to that Ferrari customer. So you're not distinguishing the customers from other customers. It's not that some are higher quality and those are the ones who understand that software is more valuable. Often, the people who are really on the edge, who are really trying to make a lot of money from software, are the ones who think they can do it with AI. And what you need to do is convince them with evidence, show them why it is that what you are doing is going to get them more of a Ferrari, right? They'll get a better one. They'll get more bonuses. They can get more for their company and their team as a result of highly reliable, secure, well-designed software that you can produce and AI won't. So, Luca, I hope that's helpful. It's, again, a case of understanding what that Ferrari customer needs and wants, the thing I didn't do. Right when I went off to the hedge fund manager and said, hey, wouldn't you like this to be faster? No, he didn't want it faster. I thought he did. And similarly, there can be a misunderstanding the other way where the customer thinks, this is easy. I could build this in Excel. That's what we always heard. We didn't have AI as a crutch for them. But we certainly had people saying, I can build this in Excel. Look, I hacked together my own version. And we'd say, yeah, who's maintaining that? Oh, it's the intern. Yeah. Did you know there's an error in cell X347? And that means you're reporting the wrong results to your investors and to the regulator. That kind of got their attention, right? Because I was able to detect problems and point out that what we would do would be higher quality and therefore more successful, right? You got that big motivator. I'm going to make more money. And I can point to something that I'm doing that will cause that to happen. Okay, I hope that makes sense, Luca. Feel free to ask if it doesn't or if I missed something about your question. Let me go on to other questions that have come in. Thomas is always with us. Very good to see Thomas in the squadron always. He asks, what's your favorite qualification approach? I've used MEDDPICC. So this is a new thing for me. M for Michael, EDDPICC. But I suspect it's a bit like Kanban, the jargon from how tech work gets done. Okay, so let me be clear. First of all, how tech work gets done, that's my previous booklet I'm just coming out with very shortly. And I said, look, you don't have to worry about some of the fancy acronyms and the fancy things that engineers do. So Thomas is pointing to that as an example. He says, hey, us salespeople, we have that same kind of thing. Us product people, we also have that same kind of thing. I have no idea what MEDDPICC is, and please don't explain it to me because I don't want to devote neurons to it. I have enough trouble keeping what I have in my brain in there. I don't want to know more about another mechanism. I just have a much simpler way of thinking about it. for which some particular tool like this might be helpful. I don't know, and it's certainly not a place where I'll dictate to you how to do it. But I will say this, whatever tool you're using, whatever mechanism you choose to use to figure out who's qualified, who's going to be good enough, interested enough to pay your price, to close quickly, to buy your software or begin using it if it's internal or anything like that. You want to figure out who's the best target for this software out of the people who are in my pipeline, out of the people I might like to talk to. What you want is for someone to have really strong motivation. Because one of the greatest difficulties, I'll tell you another story. This one's not about finance. This one's about a young squirrel who was a terrible salesman. I think I've got a little bit better since then, but I'm still pretty bad. I got a summer job, and I lasted all of 3 days. And my job was to knock on people's doors and ask them for money. So I was essentially a professional beggar. And I was raising money for a noble cause. It was a very good, slightly political organization, but it was mostly just trying to do things like build solar farms and stuff like that. Kind of good for the environment, good for the world, not terribly controversial, but also very expensive, right? So they needed a whole bunch of folks like me, well, not like me, people who are actually good at sales, to go out there and knock on doors and get people to give them money. The same kind of people. I think you have this in the US as well, and other countries. We certainly have it in Europe. People who stand on street corners in big cities, and they kind of grab you as you go by and say, "Would you like to save the world?" And it's hard to say no. I don't want to save the world. Do you want to help starving children? Well, no, I want them to starve. So they kind of corral you and get you to give them money. Well, I went around and knocked on doors, and I kind of said, "Would you like to help the environment? And would you like to give us some money to help the environment?" I wasn't very convincing at all. I raised no money, and they fired me after a few days. I think I just gave up. I can't remember which. But I was terrible at it because I couldn't connect something that was important to them to what we were doing strongly enough. It's this activation energy I'm talking about, and this is a term from physics. It probably won't be familiar to most people. But you could just imagine it as you have a ball sitting inside a little depression, right? A little hole that it can fit into, but it can roll out. But you can imagine if you have a big, heavy steel ball sitting in a depression like that, you're not going to be able to just tap it with your finger and it'll suddenly move. You have to get behind it and push real hard and go, get moving, get out of there. And that's what you have to do to get people to put their hands in their pocket and pull out their wallet, right? And say, okay, I'm going to pay you for this. There has to be something really powerful making them do that. And searching for that is an art. Salespeople are brilliant at it. And I'm not claiming for a moment that I'm better than any of the salespeople in this group. But Thomas, the qualification I would look for is there an activation energy? Is there something that can cause them to move from what they're doing? And something that would be the opposite of that would be if you were selling, I have a wonderful client called Converge. Gideon's in the squadron, and they're doing great stuff with concrete pillars inside buildings. So when you build a building, you put a chip inside the concrete pillar, and it tells you whether the building's going to fall down. Really useful, right? Very, very good thing to sell. You don't sell it to people who already have buildings because you can't take apart the concrete pillar that's holding up the building and put a chip in it. You have to put it in when you pour the concrete. So there's an important bit of timing there for how they sell that particular piece of hardware, in this case, not software. And you can do a whole lot of other things to help buildings that are already up, but you can't put a chip in the concrete pillar. They're not going to be motivated to take down their building, rebuild it with your chip. So that's the opposite. Those people have a very deep well, right? They're in a giant hole, and you'd have to drag and push and push and push to get those people out, and it's not worth it. So, Thomas, that's my suggestion for you. I don't know which of the letters of whatever the acronym was would relate to that, but that's what I'd look for. What's the really strong motivator that's going to get those folks to move? Because if you don't have something like a Ferrari to drive that, you're not where you need to be. Thomas, I hope that's helpful. Feel free to ask questions, argue with me, tell me what MEDPIC stands for, although I'm going to immediately forget it, I'm sure. Let's see. Oh, great. Randy, this is wonderful. Randy has a fantastic question. There's the customers that matter. And that's the ones who I've just been talking about endlessly here, the Ferrari customers, the ones who really are motivated. The ones who shouldn't, the ones who are, just they're never going to buy from you. If they do buy, they're going to be difficult. They don't really fit. These are my editorializations on Randy's wonderful question here. And the ones we find ourselves serving anyway. Now, that's my favorite group, because I've got a lot of clients who turn to their clients and they say, why are we helping these people? These people are not strongly motivated. They take up a lot of our time. What are we doing? Why do we have them? And Randy says, very thoughtful and cogent question, good observation. How do we collectively say no to foolish but easy money? And that's the danger, is that when I dig into, why are we serving this less ideal, less valuable, less good type of customer, what I often hear back is, well, we always have. We don't want to lose reputation in the industry. We've always been working with these folks. We know they're not quite perfect for us. We have to do a lot of customization for them, but they're old friends. We don't want to let them down. We don't want them saying bad stuff about us in the pub to their friends in this industry. We need to keep them happy. And Randy, I guess I'd say there's a similar activation energy the other way. That these are folks you should qualify out, using Thomas's language, very good sales language there. That you want to look at your current customers and say, which ones, either they already got their Ferrari, your Ferrari person left. This often happens, right? You've got a champion who gets something in and says, yay, I win. And they move on to some other part of the organization or something else that they do. And there's no Ferrari there anymore. There's nothing that's a strong motivator for that company to use you. And it's easy to switch, right? If you're a very sticky product, if you're really baked in, Converge is a perfect example, right? You're literally built into their building. Kind of hard for them to fire you and get rid of you. They can, but it's relatively difficult. But if you've got customers who are foolish money, but easy money, in other words, they demand a lot, you have to adjust your product to them, but they're there. You have them. You can probably get more of them. You kind of know what the process is to do it. You've got a good reputation in that industry, but it's not making you money. You need activation energy. So you need to find somebody who is feeling the pain of dealing with that, and they need to make a bold choice. Bold choices are hard in companies. People don't like it. I got a client right now, and I'm pushing them to make some bold choices, and boy, are they resisting. Man, we don't want to do that. That's painful. We've been doing this a long time. And I'm coming along saying, here's some better stuff you can do. Real tough, not an easy process to go through. But you need a strong activation energy, something that's really strongly motivating. Maybe somebody at that company wants a Ferrari, and that's what I got in the company I'm describing. There's a champion right at the top who says, we got to do it the new way. And you can imagine the sorts of things that they're pushing. If you look at the headlines in any software company, we're all pushing a number of new technologies that folks are sometimes resistant to. And they say, not for me. I don't want to do this. And you say, well, the company's not for you. And you got to have strong backing. This is why I often say to folks like you, Randy, and I don't know what level you are in your organization, you might be right up there at the top yourself. If you're not, you need that kind of ally. And often people tell me, I don't know how to get to that person. Start with the one above you. Start walking up the ladder until you get somebody who has a Ferrari level motivation for the kind of change you would like. In this case, Randy's case, he's saying, I want to turn down the easy but foolish money. I want to go after the bigger prize and not take the small one. Mr. Beast does this, right? So he tries to bribe you with $50,000. And some people take it because they don't want to stick around and take the risk. They might not get the $5 million. You need somebody who has the opposite thinking. You need someone who says, yeah, I want to turn down this easy thing and I want to make the bigger one because I have some Ferrari level motivation. Randy, I hope that's helpful. It's a wonderful question. I want to describe a couple other types of motivation because I've been very money focused. I feel like I'm Mr. Beast myself right now. I do not have $5 million stashed in the back of this room, so I can't help you out there. Sorry. But the Beast Games series and so on, that's all about money motivation. People are motivated by other things that are not money. And I just wanted to point out a couple of those. If you go on my website, you'll see a wonderful testimonial from a senior technical leader at the British Red Cross. Got to know the British Red Cross as I worked with him. And something I can certainly say about those folks is they are extremely strongly motivated by stuff that doesn't have anything to do with getting more money. Of course, money is a root. They do a lot of fundraising, and that's a lot of what this guy contributes to in his team underneath him. but they're fundraising for a very specific purpose of saving people's lives, right? There's an earthquake or there's a war or something like that, and the Red Cross shows up, Red Crescent in other countries, and those folks do wonderful work to save people and make us all much better human beings. So we're very grateful for what they do. Those folks internally are not motivated by making more money. They're not going to get a Ferrari level bonus. If they did, the people who run the charity would probably get in a lot of trouble, right? But there are Ferrari level motivations for those people. That can be, and I mean the individuals, right? I should really underline this. I don't think I said it strongly enough. The Ferrari level motivation is for a human being, an individual person with, eyes and ears and a head and looks like you and me, not an organization or a board of directors or anything like that. Those folks they might have other motivations. They're great to talk to, but I'm talking about an individual human who's going to get something. So that individual human here in Britain might get a knighthood, right? That person might get a peerage. Now, lots of you don't live in countries with antiquated governance systems so the reward might be very different. But that person might get an award, an industry award that would be high prestige for them. That person might get a promotion, might get something new to do, and might be in charge not just of aid, for example, in the case of a charity, aid in one country, but now in a whole region. You want to look for that personal motivation for an individual human being. And once you can tie what you do to getting that person that result, you're much closer to selling to them in the first place. And you want your engineers to know what that personal motivation is, so you can be thinking, how do I get them the Ferrari? How do I get them the peerage? How do I get them the promotion? Does this feature work for that? Is this next thing I'm about to do going to get me to that outcome? I'm talking with that customer I mentioned earlier about setting metrics and motivations for teams. What's your goal? What's your target? What are you guiding yourself toward? And what you don't want is finishing the backlog, right? Somebody else has come up with it and I'm just working my way through a bunch of tasks. I don't know what they're for. You want instead, just like Ryan that I was talking about before, to have that visceral understanding. I know this person is going to get better results. I know that these people are in this noisy environment. I'm going to get them better design. So you want to be thinking about what that personal motivation is. Now, I just have one silly example. This is intentionally silly, so please don't write me letters. Write me letters about all kinds of stuff, but don't give me a hard time about this one. But it's just so egregious and so obvious that you guys will find it entertaining, despite its political overtone, not intended. There's some guy who seems to be running the United States just about now, and he seems to tweet a lot or truth or whatever he does. And that guy keeps talking about the Nobel Prize. It's an open secret, right? He hasn't said, please give me the Nobel Prize, but he said everything else, right? And that's not a monetary reward. He's got more money than God, right? So he doesn't need any more Ferraris. He could buy as many of them as he wants. Plus, he's president of the United States, right? So he's got to won everything. But he still has something that strongly motivates him. And he's pretty annoyed that nobody's given him the Nobel Peace Prize yet. Now, you could argue about whether he deserves it and what's happening with that. I'm not going to touch the political end of that. But I will certainly say that if you were able to show up on his door in the Oval Office one day and say, hi, I got a piece of software, I got a product, I got something that could help you win the Nobel Peace Prize, you'd probably get in, right? If you credibly could actually say, this is going to help you get to this non-monetary reward that is hugely valuable to you. And so that's what I'm encouraging you to look for. And in the charity sector, for example, there are equivalents in environments where, in government, I don't necessarily mean the president of the U.S., but if you have governmental folks, they might be motivated by looking good to their parliament or their Congress or whoever it is, pleasing politicians and therefore getting further appointments and further movement in their career. Civil servants often think that way. Winning awards. There's lots of those sorts of things which don't go vroom vroom, but which do actually produce lots of motivation for people who are your potential customers, who are the ones Thomas wants to filter for, who are the ones that I'm encouraging you to have your engineers meet and understand the motivations of, to be their guide. Now, I'm going to try to take one more question. I haven't got a huge amount of time, but I'll see if I can squeeze in one more because we have some really great ones. Steve asks, okay, great one. Now, Steve knows the answer to this. I know Steve, and Steve is one of the best programmers I've ever met and a very, very clever guy. But he says, if we have to add features to make a sale, can we remove them later? Now, I happen to know that Steve is a big fan of feature thinning and removing features and simplifying software because he's really smart. He knows that when you do that sort of thing and you tighten your software to be have a smaller surface area, it's more reliable, it's more scalable, it confuses customers less. There's lots of good things that happen when you remove things. And so that can be a hard sell. For example, again, another finance example, and from a company that Steve worked with me in, we had folks who would demand access to data that they didn't really need. They were looking at financial information and financial reports and so on for Europe, where they traded, where they were working, but they would say, oh, I'm very important. I need to understand the Asian market as well. It influences the European market. I need to see everything. And it was because they wanted to feel important. It wasn't because they actually needed it. And added a lot of operational cost to have people around the world using this stuff, and maybe in this time zone, but they need to look at that report. And when do you run it? And all kinds of stuff was very complicated and difficult when we acceded to these requests, which we did not. Because we would go to somebody higher up in the organization and we'd say, this person is sitting in London. Why does he need to look at Singapore? And they'd say, oh, he's just having a laugh. He's just trying to get more power. Don't give it to him. And that was a way that they were motivated. They understood that if they made it operationally more challenging for us and themselves, they would lose money, right? They'd be less likely to get the Ferrari. So they were motivated in that particular case to remove functionality or remove access. Most folks are not. Most folks think if I have more features in my software, if I have more stuff, this is how you get bloated configuration screens, right? You've seen these. Mac OS is just one example. I happen to be sitting in front of a Mac. If you go into the settings page, and I think Windows is just the same, scroll and scroll and scroll, and they keep trying to add more sections, and it moves every time you update. And you're trying to figure out all the different things, knobs and dials and things you can switch on and off. And somehow people think that makes it better. It doesn't make it better. It makes it much harder to use. Think of some of the simple interfaces that you might use that give you a good customer experience. They are not overwhelming you with options, right? So, Steve, can we remove them later? Well, absolutely. And a lot more people should listen to you when you tell them to do that. I think the difficulty is that activation energy again. How do we push them over the edge? How do we get them out of the well? That ball that's sitting in a depression, and I just want to push it out so that it actually moves. Getting people motivated to remove features can be difficult. And again, I would come back to understanding what is it that earns them their Ferrari or knighthood or whatever it is that's the equivalent that we've talked about. How can you tie the removal of features to that outcome? And that's a tough thing. People often don't see it. This is advanced stuff, but Steve's been doing it for a while, so I trust him. All of you, the rest of you, if you haven't done this sort of motivational sales, understanding, filtering, qualifying your customers, and then using their economic motivation as a way to sell to them, as a way to decide and filter which features you build. If you haven't done that before, don't start here because this is a harder end of it. But it's certainly a very valuable thing to do. So, Steve, I hope that's helpful. I'm mostly telling you, go ahead and do what you do, but maybe get some help if you need it to get to the right level, to get to the Ferrari owner, to the bonus receiver, the knighthood receiver. And when you get to that person, sell them not on something new, but on removing something. I think that would be a lot more, people would be a lot happier if we did a lot more of that. Okay, we had fantastic questions, great participation. Really glad that all of you are here. I will just remind you again that we have another of these in a couple weeks when I'm launching my booklet on accountability. I got to get a title for that. Laura's going to remind me, so I can put that in next week's email. I've been ill this week, so I apologize. I haven't had as much on the forum and so on, but I'm back to normal. I'm going to be resuming normal service very shortly. There'll be more free events like this one. Watch the weekly email for those. Sign up for the Squirrel Squadron if you haven't already, so you can see that I didn't even mention the weekly email. I send something every week. Just made a new tweak to it, adding something new that you'll see on Monday. So lots of new stuff coming all the time from the squadron. All free, all my way of giving back, and I'd love to see all of you there. So I'll see you again in a couple weeks for the launch of the booklet. Check out the forum, ask questions there, argue with me, tell me I'm wrong. And until then, have fun and see if you can find somebody who needs a Ferrari, maybe slightly bigger than this one. Okay, have a wonderful day, everybody.